Howdy y'all, my name is Andy King and welcome to another episode of King's Comics. As we're wrapping up 2018, I told y'all I'm going to try to go through my entire comic collection. Why I committed to this, I have no idea. Once again, these are only comics that I've actually read. So I've got a lot more that I need to read, I'm backlogged, and I get a lot from the library, so please just keep that in mind as we head into 2019. There's going to be a lot more that I'm adding to the list. And I have some lent out to friends, etc., etc. So without much further ado, let's go. I'm going to be trying to go a lot faster today because I have been dragging on and we got at least 300 more comics to go through. So, this first one is Andre the Giant. This is by Box Brown and it's a biographical piece on Andre the Giant, who was a wrestler that I'm sure many of y'all know from The Princess Bride. We also go into Apocalyptic Girl. This one's by Andrew MacLean, and it's a pretty good tale of just this girl and her pet wandering a post-apocalyptic Earth. Next we have, and once again, I'm also into manga as well, so I've got volumes 1 and 2 of Attack on Titan. I've read a couple more than that, but I always like to kind of keep commemorative, if you will, pieces of books that I've read, just to kind of have them tangibly, but I usually read manga digital. Then we've got Berserk, volumes 1 and 2 as well. Let's see, there we go. Berserk, volumes 1 and 2 as well. This is one of my favorite manga of all time. It's a very dark narrative about this fantasy world where Guts, the main character, is traveling across the world as an anti-hero slaying demons. Next up we have Carnet de Voyage. This one is by Craig Thompson. He's an author, artist who likes to write as well as illustrate his own works. I'm a huge fan of his works. He's also done Blankets as well as Habibi, and he's just a phenomenal artist and writer. Actually, I have another one I just got. I forgot to mention this. This one's called Spud number 1, The Fantastic Spud. I actually got this one from a subscriber of mine, Aiden. You'll probably see him down below in the comments. He's a young author, artist, just getting started. He's really wonderful. I enjoyed it, and Aiden, if you're out there, thank you so much for this comic. Man, keep drawing, keep writing. I'm really hoping to see you as a writer, artist one day, and hopefully working for Image, DC, or Marvel. I'd love to see that. Now moving on, we have A Contract with God. This one is by Will Eisner, who's one of those famous fathers of graphic novels. In fact, many of y'all probably know him from working with Walt Disney. This comic is highly regarded as one of the most essential comics of all time. It's actually what really helped set the modern graphic novel format in place. Then we have Climbing Out by Brian Ralph, another author-artist who writes a lot of very kind of meta tales, like meta-narrative tales, just about creatures traveling the world and seeing it through their lens. Kind of dark slice of life-ish. Then we got, oh man, I'm going to get a couple of these just so we can breeze through them. But we've got Death Note, and Death Note. These are the black editions, so they're a lot bigger, a lot larger than the traditional manga volumes, and they collect some of the series. I got them really cheap at Half Price Books. Once again, actually, I had some subscribers asking me through Instagram messages where I get my comics from. Especially, remember, I'm in America, I'm in Austin, Texas, so I've got a lot of access to comics. But if you're an international reader or fan of comics, I really recommend going through, if you don't want to go through Amazon, really trying to buy comics digitally. Comixology is also owned by Amazon. You can go through the Marvel Unlimited service to read. You can just find other methods online that I'm not going to recommend or push because they might be a little less legal. That being said, there's a lot of ways to read comics either online or to order them. Half Price Books is also a great website, as well as eBay, as well as in-stock trades. But let's keep it going. Please ask me for more details in the comments or slide in my DMs on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, etc. I usually check Instagram a little bit more. Whew. Now we have The Dissolving Classroom. This one is by Junji Ito. He's one of my favorite mangaka, another writer, artist who does a lot of horror works. This is an anthological series, so it's got a lot of different comics and short little stories in it. I love it. It's horrifying. It is fantastic. I'm going to have to do another episode on my favorite horror comics of all time, especially as we approach Halloween in 10 months, because it's almost 2019. Wow, that is insane. Next up, we have An Entity Observes All Things. This one is by Box Brown as well, who I just mentioned was the artist of the Andre the Giant biography. This one's another anthological series where you have multiple tales. It's very sci-fi-esque, supernatural, very weird. Then Goodbye Chunky Rice. I actually have 2 volumes of Goodbye Chunky Rice, also both by Craig Thompson, because they were because one of them was a gift to my brother, and I lent it to my mom as well because I wanted to read it. It's a very sincere tale about these 2 friends drifting apart as they just try to explore life and mature on their own. It's also by Craig Thompson, great author-artist, and he's just phenomenal. The art is phenomenal, and the story is really just kind of heart-wrenching and real. Then we go into God's Man. This is another one of those critical works to the graphic novel genre because it's based off of wood prints. It's a wordless graphic novel. Prior to the modern graphic novel and comic formats, you had wood prints, which were just like wooden blocks carved and etched out that they would press to pages. I know, it's really archaic but beautiful. There are no words, so it tells the entire story just in wordless pictures. It's amazing. I highly recommend it because it's this kind of Faustian tale of an artist or a man who sells his soul for acclaim, for fame. Then we have Goliath by Tom Gauld. You'll notice this trend where I really like artists who do their own stuff, mainly because I can't draw. My brother's the artist. I try to write, but I'm pretty terrible at that too. But Tom Gauld is phenomenal. He does a lot of funny illustrations. This one is about the tale of David and Goliath, about how maybe we misconstrued it when we read the Bible and all that. As a Christian, I thought it was actually pretty funny, but I mean, once again, it's all about being able to take a joke as well as read this as a piece of fiction and not let it inhibit or hinder my beliefs. Then we have one of my favorite comics of 2018, which is DC Metal. This is by Scott Snyder, who just wrapped up his Batman run before Tom King started it for DC. This one's incredible. I actually recorded a review of it. I'm still editing it. I won't reveal too much, but it's just a balls-to-the-wall superhero comic. It ties in a lot of DC lore, cosmic lore, etc. It's fantastic. I can't recommend it enough. Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, the artist, really knocked it out of the park. It's amazing. Then we go into Spider-Man, The Gauntlet, Part 1. Guys, a lot of people have been asking me about my where to start with Spider-Man, some Spider-Man recommendations. This isn't a great starting point, but it is, in my opinion, a great Spider-Man tale. It's, I believe, a 5 or 6 volume series where you see Spider-Man facing a bunch of classic foes, but they're all hyper-powered. You have Electro and Sandman in this issue, just overpowered, over the top, attacking Spider-Man to the point that Electro even faces Spider-Man, and because Spider-Man's viewed as a vigilante, the people are cheering on Electro as a hero for taking out Spider-Man. It's really a grueling tale. I can't recommend it enough, once again, so please give it a shot if you get the chance. Then we have The Vision, Volumes 1 and 2. The Vision is just this really interesting postmodern tale about the Avenger, The Vision. It talks about him starting a family and has a lot of odd narratives on the idea of artificial intelligence as well as what love and spirituality means for a machine. This is by Tom King while he was writing for Marvel, and there are only 2 volumes of it, so it's a pretty quick read, really fantastic, I love it, and Tom King, once again, is the author of the ongoing Batman series for DC right now. Then we come to, I've actually got 2 of these, The Joker. This is by Brian Azzarello and, Lee Bermejo, who are working on Batman Damned right now. It's a narrative of the Joker from one of his henchmen's points of view about his insanity. It kind of paints him as the hero and a sympathetic view, if you will, about the Joker, and puts Batman in more of the light of being a villain. Really interesting. This team, Brian Azzarello and Lee Bermejo, are great on everything I've seen them worked on. Which leads me to my next comic. Lex Luthor, baby. This one is even better than the Joker, and it's one of the best Superman tales of all time, as well as pictures of what about this kind of quote that I hear a lot, that every villain is the hero of their own story. In this portrait of Lex Luthor and his life, why he opposes Superman, we see him as a man trying to do good for the world, which is kind of a blurred line when you read a lot of Lex Luthor, but it really makes you feel sympathetic for him. It really makes you just feel in line with his plight. He even interacts with Bruce Wayne. Batman interacts with Superman. Great story. Once again, this is one of my favorite graphic novels of all time. Oh my gosh, I gotta clean this up. There are so many books that are just starting to fall over and pile up. Next up, we have one of my favorite, sorry, I just love graphic novels, so you gotta excuse how many times I say one of my favorites. I'm gonna try to publish my top 100 graphic novels of all time next year, so please bear with me. But we got one of my favorite series, actually, which is The Last Man. This one is there's another genre of graphic novels besides the common like American superhero kind of paneled version, 9 panels, all that. You've got manga, but this one is Bande dessinée, which is a French-Dutch, if I remember correctly, variant of graphic novel format. It flows a lot more, it flows a lot more loosely. I don't even know if that's the right way to say that. But either way, some of you may be familiar with Tintin, which is Bande dessinée as well, and probably the best example of it. Another example would be Black Sad, which is in my collection, and I'll be touching upon that as well. But in this series, we see this combination between Bande dessinée and just manga format. It's about this dude who's just going through a lot of fighting tournaments. There's a lot of awesome kinetic action going on, and I gotta say, it's, once again, wonderful action as well as martial arts. If you like fighting, especially fighting games, I recommend this. I've got volumes 1 through 6. Yep. I've got volumes 1 through 6, and I've been waiting on the next volumes 7, 8, but they're still in French right now, so I'm probably just going to hunt around online and try to see if I can find a fan translation. It's gotten to the point that each year I've tried emailing the publisher first, second to see if they'll publish them in English, but there's just not enough of a request for them. It's a shame, honestly. Next we have Lost at Sea. This one is by Brian Lee O'Malley, the same author who wrote Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Once again, actually, I think I've stated it before, but I love Brian Lee O'Malley. Scott Pilgrim was one of the first comics I got. I think this was his first, if not one of his first works, before he really took off and got famous with Scott Pilgrim. This is just a very slice of life, I don't even know how to call it slice of life, but drama about just kind of finding your place in the world, finding your identity, feeling listless in the world, especially as you mature from adolescence into adulthood. Whew, let's keep it going. Next up is Deep Dark Fears. Deep Dark Fears is just a collection of funny little stories about random, quirky fears people have. The author, artist Frank Krause, has an Instagram account as well as a blog where people will message him their deep, dark fears, and he'll go from there and just kind of draw 4-panel short comics on what these fears would look like corporealized. Then we have Black Panther. This is one of several Black Panther comics I own, but this one is by Ta-Nehisi Coates, who is the author. He actually used to, I believe, be a journalist for The Atlantic, and is the author of Between the World and Me, which is a book that I have on my shelf. My mom got it for my birthday, and I really enjoyed it. But this Black Panther run is great because it doesn't just focus on action, it focuses on the narrative of a country that's wanting to move away from a monarchy and move towards freedom, a democracy where everyone has a voice. I really enjoyed this one as well, and I believe, if he's not still writing it, it's passed on, but Ta-Nehisi Coates is writing Captain America right now, and I'm trying to catch up with that run as well, but I seriously enjoyed his run on Black Panther. Next we have Lost Dogs by Jeff Lemire. This one's really sad. It's just about a man trying to do the best he can for his family, I believe, but he gets involved with criminal elements and has to do his best to protect his family. That might be a bit of a cliche tale, but at the same time, Jeff Lemire handles it very well. He's another typical author-artist I enjoy, one of my favorite authors as well as illustrators of all time. I think I've gone over some of his works already, but I believe he's currently writing, he's writing the Terrifics for DC right now. I know he's writing a few other works, but off the top of my head, I can't remember. He's fantastic. He's written Animal Man. He's written actually a lot of comics in the past, but he's just wonderful. Then we get into Lazarus. This one is by Greg Rucka. It was for Image Comics. I've gone over Image Comics before, I believe, and Image Comics is right up there as the indie version or alternative to DC and Marvel. This one has a post-apocalyptic world where the world is, for the most part, ruled by these families. They all have territories, and each family has like a kind of champion or guardian that they use to fight against each other. And they're called Lazaruses, right? They're resurrected from the dead, and they're given different abilities, and they fight against each other to represent their families for dominance. It's really wonderful. It's got political elements to it as well as a lot of mystery surrounding why Lazaruses come into being, where they come from, how they're trained, etc. Greg Rucka also writes a lot of Wonder Woman and some of the best Wonder Woman comics out there if you're looking for some. Next up is Kingdom Come. This is a quintessential DC tale about a far-off future where we see older versions of characters like Superman and Batman and a world run by a very different class of superheroes. It's also got a lot of biblical parallels, and it even has Shazam as well as Lex Luthor. A lot of classic heroes and villains are involved in this tale, as well as some newer ones. Really interesting. We kind of see different moralities by these older heroes as well as they try to defend the world and come to terms with a world that's very different from the world and scape of the land that they were used to when they were defending it. Oh yeah, next we have Iron Man Noir. For those who are familiar or have seen Into the Spider-Verse, they mentioned Spider Noir, well, which takes place in this kind of steampunkish 1930s version of the world. Spider Noir is not the only hero in that universe. The Noir universe was meant to be this alternate universe where they have multiple heroes. Iron Man is one of them. If I remember correctly, this was actually written by Scott Snyder, who I just mentioned wrote Batman for DC as well as wrote DC Metal. This is interesting because it's not the only one. There's a Daredevil, a Luke Cage, and obviously an Iron Man and Spider-Man Noir. I believe there's a Wolverine Noir as well. There's several of them, but this portrait they paint of the world of what these old school heroes would look like in that era is just really fun. Then we have JLA, or Justice League of America, The Tower of Babel. Actually, I think this is what is it? There was an animated special on it, Justice League Doom or Justice League Doomsday or something. But this is where, it's not actually in the movie, the animated movie, it's Vandal Savage. But in this one, Ra's al Ghul finds all of Batman's secret plans, his contingencies for each member of the Justice League. He's got one for Plastic Man, he's got one for Kyle Rayner, that's the Green Lantern in this one, Martian Manhunter, Wonder Woman, Superman, The Flash. He's got Aquaman. He's got a plan for every one of them, and then Ra's al Ghul comes up with a plan for Batman himself. All of this culminates in Ra's al Ghul's latest attempt to take over the world. You guys got to read this one. It's a classic tale of what happens when Batman goes wrong, when he's too paranoid. And in fact, that's why I like it so much, as well as DC Metal. Just these different versions of Batman that have gone a little bit over the edge, if not entirely over the edge. I'm going to take a break. That is not decaf, folks. We're running hot. Ugh. Do it for the gram. All right, now we have From Now On. This one's by Malachi Ward. I'm not going to go too far into it. It's another kind of anthological episodic piece, a lot of weird sci-fi supernatural stories strung together into one book. These typically, when I say anthological, these stories typically have nothing to do with each other. Sometimes they're alluded to be in the same universe, kind of like Black Mirror if you watch the TV show, but there we go. Now we have Fell. This one is by Warren Ellis as well as Ben Templesmith. For those who think Warren Ellis might sound familiar, he wrote Next Wave, Agents of Hate for Marvel, as well as he wrote and screenwrote the Castlevania series on Netflix, which I am a huge fan of as well. This is a great, just kind of noir-ish modern noir detective journey about this downtrodden detective who's sent to the worst part of town because of some elements you just don't know what happened. And he's just there trying to solve the worst of the worst crimes. It's like being a normal cop in Gotham, which is also explored in a lot of comics. That being said, it's interesting because I loved this. I was waiting on Volume 2, and it turns out I think his computer, Warren Ellis's computer got flooded or something like that, and we never got a Volume 2. I'm still holding out hope. I'd love to see it, but this is a great, quick, short burn. Ben Templesmith's art is also insane and really delivers a sense of horror to this tale. Then we have Ex Machina. I've already read the entire Ex Machina series. It's fantastic. It's by Brian K. Vaughan, who's done a lot of work for Marvel and DC, writing things like The Runaways, for those familiar with the Hulu series, and even some Batman and Wonder Woman. I mean, just a lot. I could go on and on. But this is the tale, kind of a deconstructive narrative of this hero called the Great Machine, who is eventually unmasked and runs for mayor of New York, I believe. And it's just this interesting thing about how he faces villains as well as foes or threats from the political side of house rather than as a superhero. I've read the whole story. I think it's like 10 or 12 volumes or something like that. Either way, it's a good story. I have just this first volume just to kind of commemorate and remind me of the fact that I've read it and that I really enjoyed the tale. Next up is East of West Volume 1. This one's by Jonathan Hickman. He's the same author who wrote Avengers, for one of my favorite Avengers runs for Marvel, as well as wrote Secret Wars, the modern Secret Wars that had an event where Doctor Doom took over Battleworld, this amalgamation of all these different Marvel worlds. In this tale we see, this is cool, this pre-apocalyptic, I know, right? This pre-apocalyptic vision of the world, mainly of America, where you've just got these different weird versions of the world, like the Kingdom of New Orleans, as well as this version of, I guess, this Chinese democracy or this Chinese empire on the western coast of America. A lot of weird visions of the future. And we have the 4 horsemen that are going across the land trying to enact the apocalypse, except Death is this awesome gunslinger, similar to the Saint of Guns or the Saint of Sinners in Preacher. I really can't remember the name. Either way, this is a good read. It's really haunting and scary because you see the Death, this embodiment of Death, the apocalyptic horseman, who's lost just a lot of love and lost a lot of, I guess, lust for life, want for life, and is traveling across the American planescape to look for his son, as well as regain what was lost in general and hunt down the other horsemen. Next we have The Infinite Horizon. This is a good one by Jerry Duggan as well as Phil Noto. Jerry Duggan actually does a lot of writing, I believe, for Marvel and DC television shows, just as a screenwriter. But this is a modern take on the Odyssey, for those who have read the Greek tale of Odysseus trying to return home to his wife. Is very interesting because he's in, I believe, the Middle East. The soldier is in the Middle East trying to make it back to his wife in this interesting version and portrayal of America that's flooded. Is pretty interesting. The artwork, Phil Noto always does great on art, but this one was another, I'm going to say good tale. It wasn't my favorite, but I always enjoy reimaginings of classic tales. Next up, we have A God Somewhere. I try to be pretty vocal about my faith, not to shove it down people's throats, but to make it clear on my stances of being a Christian. But the fact of the matter is that God somewhere really did ask a lot of interesting questions from even a spiritual perspective. We see a Christian, right? We see a dude who's afflicted, or I won't even say afflicted, I'll say granted powers, and goes over the rails. Even as a worshiper of God, we see him start to delineate himself, disassociate himself from being a believer because his powers give him God-like abilities and put him on a plane from other humans different than anything we could ever imagine. I got to take a step back to say, guys, there are a lot of comics that I'll read that I do not recommend to young adults or teenagers or kids. This is one of them. It's got very mature subject matter. If you're a parent out there, please don't let your kids read this. It's very brutal. I mean, I enjoyed some of the themes in it as well as the narrative overall, but there were some mature elements that I do not recommend or that I can't promote or abide by. Next up, we have Gotham by Midnight. The art is also done by Ben Templesmith, and it's written by Ray Fawkes. Ben Templesmith is great. He delivers a true presence of horror whenever he draws on the page, and this one is this secret core of this dark side of the Gotham Police Department that's trying to prevent Gotham from the threats that maybe Batman can't touch, or that John Constantine might have to handle. All these magical and supernatural elements of Gotham that are just too strange for ordinary cops to have to deal with. And it also helps that the leader of this troop, and you find out, is the Spectre, who's this kind of voice and hand of God in the DC universe, a very powerful cosmic and supernatural presence. Oh gosh, okay, we got another series I've collected, which is Grayson. I'll just go with Volume 1, but Grayson is after the events in the New 52 of the DC Forever Evil, the DC Forever Evil event, where we see a lot of evil versions of classic heroes come over from their alternate reality and start to try to take over the Earth 52 world, or the Prime Earth as it's called in the New 52. In Grayson, though, after the events of Forever Evil, we see Nightwing unmasked as well as Dick Grayson die. However, that turns out to be a ruse as he goes undercover as a secret agent for this secret organization called Spiral, which we find out has all of the identities of the superheroes on Earth mapped in their database, and he's trying to protect heroes against that while working and relaying information back to Batman. This is a great super spy tale. I really love the take on the character they have drawn out here, as well as what Tom King does with the character. Well, Tom King and Tim Seeley, and yes, that's the same Tom King that we saw wrote The Vision as well as writing Batman right now. I've got all 5 versions of it. It's a very fun ride. It can be a little bit bumpy at points, but it's always fun to see people or writers try different things with classic heroes. Let's see. Next up is The Haunt. Now, it's funny because The Haunt takes a lot of notes from Venom or Spawn, if you guys have seen the design, and that's because if you look at the creative team, you've got Kirkman, McFarlane, Ottley, and Capullo. Kirkman, as in the author of The Walking Dead, as well as Invincible. McFarlane, as well as one of the most famous Spider-Man writers and creator of Spawn, and CEO or founder of Image Comics. You've got Ottley, who was doing a lot of the writing on art on Invincible, as well as, I believe, the current artist for Spider-Man. And then you've got Capullo, who has done a lot of Spawn design and drawing, some heavy metal album covers, as well as for the art for Batman, while Scott Snyder was writing it. This is a pretty fun tale about 2 brothers, one who dies and is able to possess his other brother, who's a priest, to become the Haunt, this supernatural, destructive force who's got to solve the mystery of the dead brother's death, what happened, as well as protect their city and work as a secret agent that this brother was involved in before he died. I know there's a lot going on there. It's a pretty crazy and fun tale, but I think I've read 2 volumes of this, then around, or 3, and around volume 3 or 4, it kind of just starts to waver and loses interest because the creative team changes, but that being said, it's fun, at least for volume 1, maybe for volume 2, so if you get a chance, check it out. As we close out today, y'all, I've got a couple more comics, and once again, I've got a lot more. I'm going to try to get through my entire list before 2018 closes out, but as you can see, this is mentally and physically taxing, so thank you for joining along for the ride. Almost to the end, the penultimate comic I'm going to go over today is Heathentown. I actually don't know why I still have this one. It was kind of very alright. I might be giving it away soon, but Heathentown is the story about this just town where there's a lot of supernatural things going on. There's this air of mystery. You don't know why there are things going wrong, why people are disappearing, and why there are these specters in the wood kidnapping people, as well as this kind of history that going back to even prehistoric times for the town. It's very, very strange. I think it was trying to be a lot more abstract and even deeper than it meant to be, or than it actually executed on, but you know, it was an alright ride. I just felt very lukewarm to the comic, very lukewarm to it. So I don't know if I can directly recommend it, but as always, I prefer if people would read and make their own opinions. And lastly, for today, dadgum. Lastly, for today's session, we are gonna look at Henshin by Ken Niimura. Now, if I recall correctly, I believe Henshin means transformation in Japanese, which is why in Beautiful Joe, if you play the video game, he says Henshin a go-go, baby, which means, you know, transform or transformation a go-go. Either way, Henshin is another just anthological episodic series of tales all about people changing, whether that's maturing or moving to different jobs, environments, seeing friends drift away, or how they've changed over time. It's just a very good and emotional series of tales that you can tell the author, Niimura, took from his heart, as well as personal experiences, maybe even dreams, just things that you cannot just come up with off the fly, you have to experience. Ken Niimura is also the artist who worked alongside writer Joe Kelly on I Kill Giants, which just had a movie adaptation made, I believe this last year, 2017, or earlier this year. And he knocks it out of the park on this one, and also knocked it out of the park on the art for I Kill Giants. So, once again, I actually really recommend this one if you can find a copy of it. And that being said, that's all, folks, for today. Thank you so much for sticking it through. I don't even know how many comics we went through today, but as usual, I'm going to go ahead and try to write those down, add them down in the details, and yeah, thank you guys for sticking it through. If you have any comments or feedback or suggestions, please drop a line down below. I do read them. I might be a little bit backtracked because there have been a lot of comments. Thank you all so much for the overwhelming support as well as feedback. And if you liked what you saw today, please hit that like button. I'd love to see just kind of the response I'm getting to these videos, if I should keep doing these style of videos. If you really liked what you saw today, please hit the subscribe button. More content coming out. I'm trying to have at least 5 to 10 more videos out by the end of 2018, before the end of 2018. Don't worry, they're not all going to be collection videos, I promise. But then also, if you really, really liked it, I mean, just share it to your mom's Facebook wall, share it to your dad's MySpace, I don't care. And heck, I'd also love it if you followed or talked to me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You know, I don't always post about comics there, but I'd love for you to just message me if you need any personal recommendations, heck, especially for gifts for your kids. I love doing that. I helped a friend out with that recently. But that being said, y'all, thank you so much for joining me for another episode of King's Comics, and please tune in next time.